Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to another Lifestyle of Eating podcast. I'm your host, Nick Tognietti. Today, I'm excited to bring to you very new literature in the scientific and medical field that most doctors don't even know about. In fact, I was just talking to some fantastic, well-known doctors that have no idea about this. And let me just tell you why. It's not because they're bad doctors by any means. What's going on is that these literatures just came out in 2023 and 2024. And so if you've been a doctor for 20 years, you're not really studying new medical literature. I know basically like one doctor that actually studies medical literature on a regular basis. And it's because this individual has the time. She's not a full-time doctor the way some of the other doctors are. She is a full-time doctor, but like she's consulting and doing a lot of those things. So she's not working directly with patients anymore and things of that nature. So she has time to do that. Other people I know, they're ER doctors. They have 4 board certifications. So they have patients and like they don't have time to go read new literatures. So they have no idea. And today we're going to discuss dementia, which, by the way, just so you guys know, dementia is an umbrella, right? Under dementia is Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is dementia, Parkinson's is dementia. They're just a type of dementia. It's like diabetes. Do you have type 1 or do you have type 2? Right? In fact, dementia is type 3 diabetes, right? But we're going to talk about dementia, autoimmune diseases, menopause, and FSH, or follicle stimulating hormone. If you are a coach, doctor, medical professional, medical student listening to this, you need to really listen up. And you need to really get into my mentorship. You need to get into my university because the nuances that I'm about to be just dropping continually and today is very critical. And you need to learn how to connect the dots. And not only connect the dots, cool head knowledge, you can talk about it on a podcast, but can you fix it in a real client? So we have to go, what does dementia, autoimmune diseases, menopause, and FSH have to do with each other? The medical literature coming out in 2023 and 2024 started showing, now there's not tons of literature on it, but there's a good handful of PubMeds on it. And what it's showing is that higher FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, which is found in male and female, right? It comes from the pituitary gland, and its primary job for men, it helps develop sperm. For women, it develops your follicles so that you can produce an egg to get pregnant and ovulation. But what it does in both men and women is it's responsible for going to your ovaries or testicles. In your testicles, it goes to your Sertoli cells. In ovaries, it goes to your granulosa cells. And it triggers your aromatase enzyme. So it's responsible for creating estrogen from androgens, from testosterone. Or like you have androstenedione that converts to estrone as well, right? So this is the role of FSH. And what they're finding is, hey, these people that all have FSH versus the ones that don't have FSH, we're starting to notice that like the ones with high FSH, they all have higher prevalence of autoimmunes. They have way higher prevalence of Alzheimer's, because that's the specific dementia that the studies talk about, by the way, not Parkinson's so much, but we can equate it to Parkinson's too, because it's all dementia. And then their menopause, all in menopause, their FSH goes up and their inflammation goes up. What's going on? Why is FSH so connected with this? And what do we need to do to like lower FSH? Sure, you can ruin your pituitary gland and lower it, but FSH is a positive feedback loop response that says, hey, there's low estrogen in the body. Therefore, I'm going to release FSH. So what we're talking about really is, in all of these scenarios, low estrogen. And so let's get into that, because keep in mind that out of the 3 things I listed, dementia, autoimmune, and menopause. Number 1, menopause is obviously all women. Men don't go through menopause. Dementia, 66 to 70% of all dementia cases are women. And then keep in mind that out of every 5 autoimmune diseases, 4 out of every 5 are women. 80% of autoimmunes in the United States are women, which is amazing. It's showing that all of these things hit women harder because they're surrounded by estrogen which naturally lowers in women at a certain age, whereas in men, not necessarily, because we continue to produce testosterone and we'll continue to aromatize. Now, we may make less testosterone, but we're still going to aromatize and to a degree always make it. That's the reason why women are the ones who get like vasomotor symptoms. Women are the ones who get osteoporosis and frailty. Like that's why, because it's an estrogen issue. So women are very susceptible. Not that men aren't. Men, like with prostate especially, or skin, is very susceptible when it comes to estrogen. But that's a different scenario. That has to do with estrone, which is a different estrogen. So not for this podcast. But what we're noticing is this higher FSH. And so think about what this is doing. Let's break this down. FSH comes up to say, hey, we have no estrogen in the body, or it's low. We need to trigger estrogen in the body. So if FSH is high, what it's saying is we need to be high to trigger estrogen in the body because there's low estrogen. Why is low estrogen causing dementia, autoimmune, and obviously that happens in menopause? In menopause, you stop producing estrogen. And so estrogen, the reason it also causes dementia and it causes autoimmune is estrogen, E2, specifically estradiol, is calming to the immune system. So in the immune system, it's estrogen receptors all over the place. So now these estrogen receptors are not having affinity. Affinity is what we call estrogen receptor binding. So like an estradiol molecule will bind fully, you'll have full affinity to an estrogen receptor beta specifically, and therefore fulfill its need. And then now the immune system stays calm and you don't get the vasomotor symptoms, you don't get the autoimmune, you don't get the inflammation. And if you have, but then if you don't, then you start getting an immune system that becomes hyperactive, you get inflammation, autoimmune. What happens when you get inflammation? You get insulin resistance. What happens when you get insulin resistance? You get dementia, because dementia is type 3 diabetes, right? It's insulin resistance of the brain. So the estrogen is actually, if you have estrogen in the body, FSH lowers. So that's why they're saying, wait a second, this is an interesting relationship, but it's not FSH in and of itself. It's just saying, hey, FSH is a marker that tells us that we need estrogen in the body. So if you don't need estrogen, FSH will go down because you have estrogen, which is calming the immune system. It's calming inflammation. It's calming all these things, all these symptoms. But if you don't have it, FSH goes up, you get all these symptoms, and then therefore you get these symptoms. Like I said, it leads to dementia, it leads to autoimmunes and all these things. So one of the interesting things, I was just running it by an MD yesterday, actually. Last night we were studying together, and I brought her a case study of mine. A few, actually. I brought her 4. And one of my case studies of a 50-year-old client, she came to me with LH and FSH. The LH was, I don't know, 38, and FSH was like 56 or something. So menopause numbers. And even she said, the doctor, she goes, wait, yeah, she's in menopause. And I go, no, that's the crazy thing. This client has been getting periods every single month. They're not menopausal. She was like, really? I go, yeah. So this client of mine ended up having PCOS, major cortisol issues, major gut infections, no sleep, no energy, sex drive issue, like everything, right? In 5 months, we completely and utterly reversed everything. She's like $1 million now in 5 months. And we got her blood work back and all of her lab markers. Her insulin went from a 13 to a 6. She was pre-diabetic. Now she's not pre-diabetic. Thyroid improved. Kidney markers went from in the 70s on EGFR to the high 90s. Perfect. Unbelievably perfect. Cortisol normalized. What else? Cholesterol radically improved. Glucose, blood glucose, fasting glucose improved from over 100 down to the low 90s. Everything. But what's crazy, her LH and FSH, they were both 6.9. And I remember the doctor that I was studying with last night goes, what the heck? Oh my gosh, this is insane. And I started explaining like what I did. I said, hey, number one, I think that these things came down because the inflammation at her theca cells is so non-existent now. She's able to take cholesterol better and produce hormones. So I think the LH and FSH can calm down. But I go, here's the other thing that I did. the whole time I'm binding to her estrogen receptors, and I believe I'm hitting full affinity. Here's the thing about affinity. When it comes to affinity, just means, hey, you're binding to an estrogen receptor, but you have full affinity. Like an E2 molecule will fit like a lot, like a key in a lock. It'll reach full affinity with a estrogen receptor beta, because you have alpha, you have beta, and then you have, let's forget the third. It's like gibber. Yeah, the gibber. It's a different receptor. And we have a little bit less knowledge than what estrogen receptor alpha or beta will do than with a giver. And so with this, when it comes to phytoestrogens, phyto means plant. So we're talking estrogens that are in plants, which, by the way, contrary to common belief, do not cause breast cancer. In fact, they kill breast cancer because they all bind to beta, which is anti-proliferative of cancer cells. And they are completely healthy for the body. They do not do anything wrong. So you can go ahead and just tell your doctor that has told you otherwise. No, it's pretty simple. The plants that God has made for us are for the healing of the body, plain and simple. God made healing plants. Okay. Now, with that said, you can have partial affinity, minor affinity, like 70% affinity. It's just, hey, how much of that receptor is fully getting bound to? Like, are you getting the full molecule of what would look like an estradiol or estrogen 2 molecule to hit that marker? And so with phytoestrogens, if you actually look at an E2 molecule in science, right? I actually have a PubMed literature in my university showing this molecule. And then you take 5 or 6 different classifications of phytoestrogens. That E2 molecule has 4 major pieces to it. Every phytoestrogen has about 2/3 of that molecule. And it's like a different 2/3, right? So one phyto doesn't have all of that molecule, which means it'll only be a partial affinity, which is why the only PubMed literatures in science that we actually have testing phytoestrogens, literally, I have them, by the way, the only ones known to mankind today. I personally have them in my university. They even say at the very bottom, in the conclusion section, they say, we in science have not yet tested a multitude of phytoestrogens on the body to see if this can replace estradiol. We see the symptoms that it's doing, and we think that it can replace estradiol prescription as a hormone prescription, as a hormone replacement. But we can't prove it yet. We only have tested one at a time. However, it literally says in there, we need to have studies that show a multitude of phytoestrogens, because this is how the longevity communities eat and how we believe they're getting their results. So what they're saying is, we believe that this is how we do it, but we can't prove it yet. For me, I believe I have done enough work in my practice with science literature that even doctors do not have. In fact, I have multiple doctors that have said, we've never tested this, but Nick has. I believe that I can prove these things. Okay. But obviously, that can still be considered an opinion until you put that officially through certain literatures and then things of that nature. But what I started doing with this client was I started binding to her estrogen receptors with a multitude of phytoestrogens, which is what I do with my clients. And I do it with myself as well. So like, we're talking flax seeds, different berries and fruits. We're talking tempeh. You might be talking tofu. You're talking cacao nibs. You're talking chasteberry, which is not just for progesterone estrogen. That is a major phytoestrogen that reduces vasomotor symptoms in 88% of menopausal women, for that matter. Shoot, what else are we talking about? We're talking about soybeans, edamame. We're just talking about pinto beans, legumes, lignans. We're talking about lentils. We're talking about all these different varieties of phytoestrogens, right? So I put an abundance of these different ones in my clients' regimens. And this is why their sex drives return. Granted, I'm also fixing up cortisol. I'm fixing up a lot of things. So it's not, oh, this fixed sex drive. This is a major contributor to it. I calm the immune system, things of that nature. But nevertheless, I did these things, and it was like, oh my gosh, how is this happening? The other thing too is that certain phytoestrogens, especially if it makes equal, can literally cross the blood-brain barrier. If it crosses the blood-brain barrier, now we're talking about this will literally trigger FSH to lower. And so if you create equal, depending on your gut microbiome from certain phytoestrogens and whatnot, you're going to create equal. And if you create equal, FSH will directly lower. But even by binding to the receptors, what I have found is that you're still fixing sex drive, you're still fixing autoimmune, inflammation, insulin resistance, all of those things. And so with the FSH, what I see in my clients over menopause, keep in mind the medical field does not test LH and FSH over the age of 50 or 55, depending on when they hit menopause. Why? Because they say ideally their LH and FSH is going to go up, obviously. Their hormones are high. But what we're finding is that's not necessarily the case. Because even I am having 70-year-olds with low FSHs and LHs in the single digits. The only difference between these clients and my other clients that are over 70, is that the ones who have low FSH all eat phytoestrogens. I have ones that are like blue zone lifestyle people, or they are Venezuelan. So they still, to this day, they've never bought processed food in their home. They juice their own oranges, they juice their own fruits, they eat beans on a daily basis, like that. They eat a Venezuelan diet. I can't emphasize how critical this is. I have so much insight when it comes to dementia and reversing these different types of things and preventing these rapid epidemics that 1 in 2 people in the United States over the age of 85 have. Can you believe that? 1 in 2 people. That it's everybody either has a family member with dementia or somebody with dementia. I can tell you both. I have both. My grandma passed, but my grandma had that. It's just so rampant. And we can prevent this. This stuff happens starting in your 30s. This is not an 80-year-old thing. Keep in mind, this is an insulin resistance, especially from cortisol and estrogen receptor binding, starting in your 30s, 20s, 30s, 40s. We can start preventing these things now and change this next generation. Not only that, there have been people who on their own have literally reversed full-blown dementia on their own with no medication. We can do this stuff. We can really change the game, but we have to start looking at the bodily systems and the way they're connected. The problem is, in the functional space, nobody knows bodily systems. If I said, hey, tell me why thyroid messes with fertility, somebody's going to go, I don't know, it messes with hormones. It's like, why? You're not going to understand that low T3 triggers thyrotropin from the hypothalamus, which raises prolactin, which then lowers kisspeptin neurons in the hypothalamus, which then lowers GnRH from the pituitary, which then means you're not going to produce LH and FSH and the testicles are over. Like, people can't explain this stuff in the functional space. So in the medical space, they can explain it. The problem is they don't think that way. So on both sides of the coin, we're broken. So the functional space skips to like the end result because really nobody in the functional space is a doctor. Everybody's some form of a practitioner that never studied to the level of depth with bodily systems, but they look on the surface at these roots, which is great. They have the right heart, but they just don't have the connected knowledge when it comes to the physiology. And then doctors don't think functionally. They don't think root cause. They don't think let's prevent your disease. They don't think let's reverse your disease. So on both sides, we're inadequate. And so my job in the functional space is to bridge that gap, to bring the adequacy through understanding the physiology in the functional space, keeping your desire to be functional and fix root causes. But you're not going to be able to fix these things unless you understand why high FSH triggers autoimmune and dementia. What is it doing? What's its job? What's the response? What's the cascade of events that happens when high FSH happens? What causes high FSH? Why is it related to these symptoms of dementia, autoimmune, and menopause, and so forth? We have to be able to do this. And so if you're a coach and you don't know how to do these things to just a pristine level on spot at any moment, then you need to get into my university, like plain and simple. You need to get into my university. Like, this space is becoming saturated. It is expected to reach over 60 billion annually by 2027, which means what? It's not, oh, let me go make money. What it means is wherever the money is, where the people are. We're not in this for the money. We're in this for the people. We're in this to give people's lives back. We're in this to redeem these people back to their families, their spouses, their sex drives, their energy, their joy, get them out of bed, let them thrive. We're in this to get them back to the lifestyle of the Garden of Eden that God designed for us. That's what we're in this for. If that's not what you're in it for, then don't come to my university. If that's what you're in it for, you need to get in my university now. Registering can start ASAP. We launch it at the end of the year. This is going to be the key to you getting to the depths of the knowledge that you need to fix these tough cases that no functional practitioner or medical professional is able to really get to the root of at its core as a whole. They might be able to explain concepts of it, but when it comes down to just radical results of, hey, the person was this way and now they're this way, that's what I care about. I don't really care about you being able to talk smart for an hour on a podcast. Can you fix somebody? And if you can't fix somebody like this, the way I'm talking about, then wonderful. Most people can't. But now is your opportunity. Now is your time to step in and shine. Now is your time to make a difference and an impact, starting with you, with your family, your friends, and your community. I really hope that this starts to bring some soul searching and some digging, saying, hey, you know what? Let's start to connect these dots. Let's start to learn about physiology. Let's start to learn functionally how to fix these things and what are the root causes here of X, Y, and Z. Let's stop thinking conventionally of, hey, what's the medication, or this is inevitable, or, oh, it's genetic. It's a bunch of crap. It's not genetic. Screw your genetics. Sorry. That's saying I have a light switch in the house. I have to use it. No, you don't. Genetics are there, but genetics are just the weapon. You're the one that loads the gun and pulls the trigger. Okay, so just because I have a weapon in the house doesn't mean I ever have to use it for the rest of my life. I get to choose whether I'm going to put that bullet in the gun and I'm going to put it to my head and pull the trigger. That is what our lifestyles do. That is what our choices do. That is what happens when you violate my 7 pillars of disease reversal, prevention, and longevity. This can be fixed. This epidemic can be halted in its tracks, and we can redeem America and make it great again. So please let me know if there's any questions. Stay tuned for the next episode.